And we are live. Hello, everybody.
Hello. After a week hiatus.
I know that was on me. I wasn't feeling so well, but I
practice what we preach.
Indeed, gotta take care of our health, physical, mental, spiritual.
You had to prioritize your health and survive a tornado this week. All in a day.
Which is very true. Very, very true. The tornado was definitely a little bit more intense, but yeah.
Well, we have a fun topic this week. We want to talk about humor at work. And this was, we were talking about something Raquel had said a few episodes ago. Guys, if you're thinking to make a joke at work, just don't. And I loved it because I had been reading a book called Humor Seriously by Jennifer Aaker and Naomi Bagdonas. And I don't know if I said that right. I hope I did. And so just wanted to share some of the research from that book, some of the research from, because I kept looking into this, and anybody who follows my TikTok has probably seen a few clips that I've done that I just couldn't wait to share. So I'm excited to talk about how humor plays at work. But before I dive into that, is there anything you wanted to cover, Raquel?
No, I guess that. No, I don't. I'm gonna.
I know. So I'll tell you what I plan on talking about, and I have an internal prediction on when you'll jump in. But
sounds good.
Feel free to surprise me. So I plan on talking about why humor is good for business, 4 myths that people who don't think they can use humor, and they're debunked. How to tell if a joke is appropriate. That's the one that I predict you'll have some thoughts on. And tips for incorporating it into business. Okay. So most of this is from the book Humor Seriously, which I very much enjoyed. So anybody listening to it, I recommend giving it a. If they're listening to this, I recommend giving it.
What is it? I'm going to read it here. What is it? Humor.
Humor Seriously, and it's written by one of them's a neuroscientist. So, and they took improv classes. They did stand-up comedy. They teach a humor class at Stanford for MBAs. Like they're legit. So it was very interesting.
That's pretty cool.
So humor has always been important to me. So, most people know me as a class researcher. And I recently wrote a book chapter in the book Navigating Your Ph.D. on working class culture norms clashes in the academy. Like we talk about like culture clashes, the financial differences, there's been plenty written about that. That's a very real problem. But we just focused on the culture clashes. And I talked about in the chapter that one of them for me was there's a lack of a sense of humor in the academy. Like I could not handle it. I hate the way that you're expected to write and present in academia. And I feel like you can still share factual scientific information and have fun. Yeah. And I think that that's more common in like working class cultures. And my co-author and I wrote about that. So when I heard of this book, I had to get it. So I have downloaded, I think this was from like Goodreads. The book summary is, in Humor Seriously, authors Jennifer Aaker and Naomi Bagdonas combine a science-based analysis of stand-up comedy with evolving neuroscience, stories, and lessons learned from corporate leaders who have leveraged humor as part of their way of doing business to great success. From these facts, they've developed principles for incorporating humor into your professional toolkit. While the book seems written for a corporate audience, there's much to inform the use of humor in a mediation or facilitation practice. So I just has its role at work. So they say that humor is an underleveraged tool, and it can be used for power. It can give you a competitive advantage against your peers. It's related to higher retention of employees, more innovative solutions, and teams that are more resilient to stress. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah. And it sounds about right? Like, because if it's more lighthearted, you're way more, what is it? Like I will definitely say this wrong, so don't quote me on this, but you have like your sympathetic and your parasympathetic like nervous system, right? So if you are stressed, you are on, what is it, fight or flight mode. You're not really paying attention. Yeah, but if you are relaxed, if you can lower your guard a little bit, you relax a little bit, and you can actually, understand things better, do things better, have a more,
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that we've talked about a little bit about, like when people have to code switch, right? Like I do stuff on the unwritten rules of when you're having to fit in and you don't even know the rule book. Like that takes away energy from focusing on actually doing the job.
yeah.
Right. And so it's always important to know, like, if people are stressed out, they're not able to do their best work. So, and we know this for some.
We should say this out loud, like, louder and even louder and even louder, because it's like, stop it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, quality, not quantity, people. And you can get a good amount of quantity with quality, but there's a breaking point. So my Microsoft Word notes are giving me, I never learned how to use Mac completely. Anyway, so here's some stats. Managers who are perceived as having a sense of humor are rated 23% higher in respect by their subordinates, and they are rated as 25% more pleasant to work with. That's a chunk.
Yeah.
That's okay. 50% of Americans have left a job to get away from their manager. And turnover, I know, I thought that too. Turnover, that's 50% who admitted it, right?
Okay.
Turnover in the past few years, which I don't know this actual study, this is from the book. I listened to audiobooks, so I didn't have like their footnotes, but they said that turnover by employees has increased by 88% in the past decade, which has cost employers billions.
Yeah.
I need to find that exact study because I'm very curious, but
it was just hospitality. That's all it is.
Well, what we had talked about on here, I know we have like a lot of places do not measure how much their turnover costs them.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And so I have run across this study because I use it in one of my keynotes, that today's business leaders globally are tied with elected officials in what people perceive as trustworthy.
Wow.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Because nobody likes their politicians, right?
That's true. That's very true.
As of 2018, only 34% of young adults trusted corporate and political leaders. So young adults are who are probably in college and early in their career now, right? Yeah. So we're not getting this wave of people who are going to come in and change that belief. But organizations that do maintain high trust, the book says, are thriving. And I agree. Yeah. I don't even know which studies they cited, but I know from the studies I've seen that is true. Trust is linked to higher innovation, higher performance. They do reference a 2016 study where employees with high trust environments are 32 more times likely to take risks that might benefit the company.
Because
they're 11 times more likely to see things as innovation opportunities more than competition opportunities. And they're 6 times more likely to outperform other people in their industry. And this is what I think I made a TikTok a few weeks ago where I talked about business leaders look at every way to cut costs. Why do we forget that treating people well is a lot of them?
It's all of it. I mean, truly, right? Like it's, yeah. And we always go back to the subject, right? Because I think it's such a big part of it too, of just simply people is what actually they're going to generate anything for you, right? Like even if you have machines, even if you have AI doing, the people who are buying are not machines. Yeah, they're actual people, right? Mm-hmm. And there's such a lack of understanding of like treating people nicely, right? Like treating people and nicely, and we talk about nice and kind, but treating people right, making it an environment where people want to stay, making it a pleasant place to be. And Yeah, I don't understand. I honestly don't understand. And this madness of always trying to, no, we're just gonna keep pushing. We're just gonna keep pushing. Just keep pushing. You're like, but you're pushing what to get to where? We talk about this. I think the last all the episodes that we have of like just don't just stop. Like it just I just don't understand. I honestly
Yourself
don't.
off the cliff.
Yeah, it just keeps on. I was thinking about right before this is like, but why is it right like that? I was trying to choose a shirt, and we talk about professionalism before, and this and that, and like, and I was trying to think about humor as part of it, and like, just trying to understand the whole topic and how things fit. And it's like, why is it right like that? Um, we, we can't have fun at work, right? Like why have we be, or even like, and I think any settings, right? Like for example, if you're religious, right? Like religion can be fun, it has to be serious. Studies, academia has to be serious, you can't have fun. Work has to be, and you're like, but, or even if you go to a professional, right? Like if you go to a doctor, they can't crack jokes with you, they have to be serious. Like, but why? I don't understand. Like, again, right? Like it feels like you have to do things very
Why do we
seriously.
associate fun with inaccurate?
Correct. Or like if I'm being fun or if I'm being lighthearted, it means that I don't know what I'm doing or that I'm lacking of something, which
Mhm.
the truth is, if I can make a joke about it, if I can be lighthearted about it, it's because I actually do know a lot about it. And that's why I can relax and enjoy, the whole thing, or even anything that we do in life, right? Like I think uh we mistake seriousness with how much you care about something. And I think I'm also how much you care, right? Like so
Mhm.
if I'm at work but I'm having fun, she doesn't care about it because she does
Right,
not
well,
take it
we literally
seriously.
use the phrase, "I'm taking this seriously."
Correct. You're taking it seriously, right? And I think that that is one of the big things, especially so uh of all people, right? Like, but I'm gonna mention all, but um I I am a Bon Jovi fan. I will admit that. Woof. Like, but so I was watching an interview with John Bon Jovi, which is recent, and he was saying how, and he's not the nicest. I'm just gonna throw it out there. He's just not like he has his opinions and whatever. But he was saying how uh he was talking about Brazilian people and how he knows that they are Brazilian because the way they approach him, that they come so full of life and they come so open and they come like, my name is like, my name is whatever. And I'm from Brazil. It's like, no shit, you're from Brazil. Like, just from the way you approach me, I knew you were, right? And that was one of the things that I had to fight a lot with when I moved here because, yeah, in Brazil, we are very expensive, right? I haven't worked in Brazil in a long time, so I don't think that the work environment is that expensive in there. I never actually work a lot in Brazil before I moved here, so I don't have a lot of work experience in Brazil. But we are way more open, and lighthearted and joking and more casual per se. And when I moved here, I understood that I couldn't do that. And a
Mm.
great example of that, I was working at a hotel in Chicago in 2012, and it was a very serious work environment. Right. And that's what I was like, this is the one thing I want to talk about because I was like, it was a very serious environment. And I remember being in the back. So for those who don't know what hotel, I think I mentioned this a couple episodes before, but what pretty much when you go to a hotel, you have the front desk of the hotel, right? Like the reception, and there's usually a door where people come in and out of from, and you're like, what the heck is that? Is that little place? That's usually we call it the back office. So like that's where the front office managers and supervisors they stay. And I was back there, so I'm not facing guests or anybody. And somebody said a joke, and I was having a great time that day. And that wasn't a place that I had many great days, but that day I was laughing, and my laugh is really loud. And
Same.
I mean, and my boss's boss came down, and she's like, you can like this, you can't be this loud back here. And I said, but I'm in the back, like we're all joking. She's like, still, you can't. This is a professional environment. And then that moment, I was like, I don't belong in here. I need to get the heck out of here, which I did. because it's true. Like if you're going to, I wasn't in front of people, right? Like I was in front of guests. I was enjoying a moment with my coworkers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then it's funny. I was looking for this picture when we start, and then I eventually, which very funny, I ended up working for a company who no longer exists, so I can actually talk about it. But one, they had no, it's a good thing though.
I
Their
just love it when like somewhere's toxic. I mean, you never I hate to see people fail, but when like it validates you weren't crazy. You
oh,
know what I mean?
100%.
Oh, really? That didn't work out for you? You were unethical and terrible?
No,
Huh.
it's yeah, no, it's terrible. But so I work eventually for another company, and they had one of their values was laugh often. And I remember sitting on, and they had this like in their see they
Listen,
had
laugh
like,
often, be humble. Okay.
so the values, this company now was bought by Hyatt, so they're all part of the same company. But the 10 core values, I remember when I interviewed, they had that posted, right? And it was a big deal for them because they wanted, when we were waiting to be interviewed, they wanted us to kind of, you were looking at it, and they, when they came in, they would ask, oh, did you see it, which ones were the most intriguing to you, which one caught your attention the most, because it was a very value driven company, right? So it was like celebrate individuality, be thoughtful, listen, laugh often. And but my favorite was always like the follow your heart, no, follow your angel, ignore your devil. Oops. Most of the time. So like you can still crack a joke. So we used to prank each other, we used to do things here and there. But be humble, seek balance, cherish our resources, but laugh
So
often.
this was this a legit place? Like it doesn't sound bad at all.
No, no, it was, but they are just, the hotel is still there, but it was just bought by a bigger company.
Oh, it
But
was bought like as in like it was more successful.
yes, yes,
Okay,
but
I take back my laugh then at the cynicalness. Okay, because I was like, wait, this sounds awesome.
no, 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 it was great, and that's why I still have it. And it's interesting because I remember they asked me, they said, which of these values call out to you more? And the very first thing I said was laugh often. And they asked, I was like, well, because I worked in a place a few years ago that I couldn't laugh.
Mm.
And that was such a part of me. It is a part of me, right? Like laughing, expansion, like just being loud and being expressive. And if you don't allow me to do that, what the heck am I doing here? So I think
Hmm.
that, comes with authenticity, all the topics that we talk about all the time, but how humor is seen as in, it's not work appropriate. What,
Well,
being fun and
and
laugh, it's not.
the book talks about that, and it says that this is a key for building trust because there's clearly a trust crisis with leaders. And
Oh
so
yeah.
there's actually a study in 2019 actually said that asked employees like what do you look for in a leader, and it's different from what was in like the 80s, which was like the perfect person, which doesn't exist. But in 2019, people said they want a leader who knows knows that overcame obstacles and is successful. But two, they want someone who speaks like a regular person.
Yeah.
And we talk all the time, and I do in my work too, on unwritten rules, on like the corporate jargon, the indirectness, all of that is so frustrating for people, and it causes business problems with miscommunication. So, but laughter specifically, you're talking about you don't want to be somewhere you don't laugh. This isn't from the book, but I found it on Forbes did an article that laughter is a physical sign of trust because you don't laugh with people you don't feel safe around. Not genuinely, not like the
Yeah.
don't tell me laugh you do when there's like someone in public you don't know who's like
Yeah, not nervous laugh or like, oh, I don't know what to do kind of laugh. Yeah.
right. Because laughter actually releases oxytocin,
Hmm.
which is known as the love hormone, but it's also released during laughter. It's a bonding molecule. And so people who laugh together are often closer, and that is good for teams.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean people are falling in love. Nobody needs to freak out. It's just another way that oxytocin is released.
And that's why, right? Like when they say to also like go have fun someplace, right? Like those team building activities that they take people out of the work environment, right? Like, and that's when people actually can be together, right? Like as one, either because they're laughing together and they're playing
Right.
jokes and they're playing games and they're having fun.
How many executives love to play golf? And like that's been like one of the things I've been harping on lately because it's an old article, but it came up that Forbes sent to me, I guess, because it knows what I do, even though it's 8 years old, about that being a golfer makes you a better CEO. That was like the title. And it was really about that's where they build their relationships,
Yeah.
which is apparently we know discriminatory. But I was like, so when are we going to talk about that it's not golfing that makes you better? It's relationship building, which is genuinely usually seen as a woman trait and
Yeah.
is more common in working class communities and communities of color. Like it's not just like you don't need to rebrand it as golf. Like you can just do it. It's doesn't mean you're gay to the homophobes. Like everybody needs to build relationships.
Which is, yep.
Like so humor, I thought you'd like this. The book also says humor helps you overcome fear because it's bold. It requires authenticity and it allows you to provide a different perspective. So the book said the goal of humor shouldn't be to be funny. That's egotistical, right? It should be to have fun. And that's
Yes.
where you're going to see benefits. Yeah. So they said humor works as a bridge and a ladder. From a bridge, it builds social connection. We talked about the oxytocin release, so you're bonding with people. But it also works as a ladder, is that it can actually like boost the status that you're perceived in. Like people who are funny are more likely to be seen as more competent, and people attribute higher status. That's a study from 2016.
I mean, don't we? I mean, women, I know for fact that a lot of women I know, what is the one they say? Like, what do you look for a man? Somebody that makes me laugh. Because, dude, seriously,
But a lot of them don't make me laugh.
What?
I said, but a lot of men don't make me laugh.
No, and that's the thing, right? But why do we want to be with somebody that makes us laugh, right?
We
Clearly
bond.
the oxytocin, yeah, and then you have that good feeling, but you
We
also
help.
know that person has like, I hate saying this because this sounds like a freaking dating app, but like not take yourself so seriously, but somebody that can see both sides of life, right? Like
Well,
the
so
seriousness
but that was another study they talked about is people do perceive if you're high enough in the organizational ladder. Don't do this if you're entry level because it's self-deprecating humor. Not if you're entry level. I got to say that again because then you can look like you don't know what you're talking about. But if you're like an executive, a top dog, you don't need to be punching down at people. That's not going to go over well. That's not funny. You're too high up. Punching down is when you make fun of somebody who's lower than you in status. So the only person to make fun of is yourself. And there are many CEOs in real life who do this. Like they give the example of one of the Apple executives who used to like do skits where like the maid would slap him. And he would do stuff like that to like show employees that like he wasn't above them.
Yeah.
And it would be like silly skits. It would be like
Yeah.
you know, probably like the Three Stooges type of thing.
I'm
And
pie, yeah, like
right, like goofy, you know, and it because you shouldn't be punching down. Like a skit where he's punching her, obviously for many reasons, is going to be inappropriate.
yes.
So it can, but we perceive when we know that our leaders can laugh at themselves, we do perceive them as more competent because we're like, wow, they must really know what they're doing if they have the ego in check.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily make fun of something you're an expert in. You know, like you don't ever want to, especially if you're a woman or maybe from an underrepresented background. Like if you're an expert in healthcare, don't say that you don't know healthcare, right? But you can make fun of yourself. Like, I mean, I had a professor once who could never figure out how to hook up the computer to the presenter, right? And so he'd always need help. And he'd be like, yeah, you know, they don't give PhDs away for this. Like he would like throw himself under the bus of being like, you know, all the things I know and I can't get this little thing out, you know, and it was like one of those things. It was like, ha ha ha, you know, was it stand-up comedy funny? No, but it helped lighten the mood. But he at least acknowledged like, I should know how to do this, but I don't, you know?
Yep. As so we know, I mean, you started with that today. You said, what were you saying that you couldn't get Microsoft? You said, I have not. learn how to use Mac.
Oh
You
yeah,
said
I am
that.
no. Oh, that was just honesty. That wasn't even a joke. Um, but the also so it can also have business perks. And this one, I don't want this to sound manipulative, but this is just a study that people who watched a funny clip with a group before people who watched a neutral clip, the people who watched the funny clip shared 30% more personal information with the people in their group than the people who watched the neutral clip. So the good part of that is it can be like a trust building thing, which is what we talked about. There's a trust crisis. But of course, you could also manipulate that if you are in, a gossipy organization. You'd want to be careful,
No, but this would be great for interviews.
right?
Like you
Because you
start with like either have somebody tell a joke. I actually had somebody once ask me to tell them a joke during an interview. I'm like, I don't know any jokes, but I do think that if there is something that you can do that can cause the person to laugh, because again, right, you laugh and you kind of lower your guard. You like you lower your guard, and then now you can actually be yourself.
I don't think I consciously do it, but I think I do always try to make my interviewers laugh. I don't think I
Yeah.
think about it, but like that is something I instantly do. And part of that I think is because I'm just awkward and I'm like, let's crazy. But it is actually so they did look at what about during negotiations? And during negotiations, negotiators who added a funny phrase at the end, people conceded 18% more than people that they didn't. So that what they would say is they'd be like, all right, this is my final offer, but I'll throw in my pet frog. That's literally all they said. That was the humor. And people would laugh and be like, okay. Well, when they
Dude, like
didn't,
this is really making me think, and I'm not just talking about like work in like work settings, but like just in life in general, right? Like
like buying a car or
of
something, like,
anything.
yeah, when they were like, when they didn't throw in their pet frog, people kept pushing. It's
That is
wild, right?
interesting. Yeah. No, but just like I'm thinking of this like for myself, even like on my day to day. I'm just like how because it does, right? Like I have been called many times to being too serious myself. So even though I am very relaxed and funny, I do take I enter spaces very serious, right? Usually enter the space with a very strong, we're going to do this kind of attitude instead of the opposite of like, I will calibrate my intensity as needed instead of starting really high and then kind of like lowering from there. So as you're saying this, I'm like, maybe I'll give that a try of like, I'll laugh for a little bit. I like make a joke and make something fun. And then we enter the space, whatever space that is, right? Like either, I don't know, a work environment, a family situation, a relation, whatever it is, right? Like a conversation that we're going to have. But it kind of
Mhm.
lower. I think no, I think this is like a great advice for me. I love it.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the 4 myths of why people don't do this at work. And one you've already brought up is that the serious business myth. And this is
Yeah.
especially for people early in their careers where it's from insecurity, lack of experience that you don't know enough about it. But there's also just like this idea that work is serious business, as you talked about. But there's a study from the Robert Half Institute that found that 98% of people preferred a colleague with a sense of humor. 84% of people believe that those with a sense of humor perform better at work.
Yeah.
So even when we have this notion that work should be serious all the time, people actually perceive you as being better at your job when you're genuinely humorous, or you have what they called in the book a culture of levity.
Yeah.
So the myth number 2 is the failure myth, which is the paralyzing fear that the humor will fall flat. And this is where they really stress the point of humor is not to get a laugh. That's a great perk, but it doesn't mean that it didn't win if nobody laughs. The only way a joke fails is if it's inappropriate.
Okay.
Even attempting to make a joke lightens the mood, even if it's like a dad joke, right? It lightens the mood and it gets people's like guard down
Yeah.
unless it's inappropriate. And I'm gonna harp on that more in a minute. Myth 3 is the being funny myth, that people have to just be funny. Or I'm sorry, that's the 4th one. So it's the feeling that in order to use humor and levity in the workplace, you have to be funny. And this is where so people think they're funny or they're not. But statistically, most of us have a sense of humor. It may be a different type of a sense of humor, but there's some data that shows people laugh more on the weekends than during the weekdays. So you know what's funny, you just don't bring it to work. So, but again, where you get the perks of humor at work is not getting the laughs, not being funny. You have to make it not completely about you. Like the book doesn't necessarily talk about this, but I'm telling you this of like, if you're going into work thinking I'm going to be the funny person, I'm going to get all like, that's not going to work. It needs to be about how can I make the people around me feel comfortable? And that's going to also help you with knowing what's appropriate, because the point is signaling that you have a sense of humor, not being a stand-up comedian. Myth number 4 is the born with it myth, that you're either born funny or you're not. And are you familiar with the growth versus fixed mindset?
Yeah.
So that's what this reminded me of, because the growth mindset, for anybody who doesn't know, is that you see things as learnable. Mm-hmm. Well, a fixed mindset is like you're born with it or you don't. And I think this is really big in the US, especially with social media. We think people just have it or they don't. Like these athletes were just born with incredible ability, or, you know, they just came out the womb saying like that. And like, no, like even stand-up comedians like hone this craft for years, right? Mm-hmm. And so humor is something that you practice, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be Ali Wong, okay? But you don't have to be Ali Wong to get some perks at work. Oh, Ali Wong's hilarious.
She's hilarious.
So here is where we might get a little spicy. There's the anatomy of a joke is 2 things. What makes a joke? At the heart of it, why it's funny is because at the heart of it is something is true. And the second part is that there's a surprise. Mm-hmm. So I found an example from Toastmasters, is that there's a joke by Stephen Wright, who I don't even know who that is. Apparently he's a stand-up comedian. I was just looking for something that's like a palatable joke to say online, okay? It says, I've been getting into astronomy, so I installed a skylight. The people who live above me are furious. Is it like the best joke in the world?
No, but
But what's funny about it is the misdirection.
Yeah.
Right? Is that you think it's going to be on his roof, and then you realize like, what, he's in an apartment complex, and there's like why I think that's not like a hilarious joke is because and maybe I'm just too literal. I'm like, so did you put
where is that? Yeah.
Your ceiling? Right. I'm sure this is part of a bit that he has, but you'll start, once you know that those are the 2 things, you start to like notice when people tell jokes, like why that is funny. So I think that this is where we get into trouble with appropriate versus inappropriate jokes. Because when you tell a joke, you're signaling something that you perceive to be true. So inappropriate jokes can weaken relationships. They have the opposite effect of what you would want at work. And the book talks about the distance and pain are connected to humor. So if the pain that you would feel making a joke about something, even if it's true, is very far from you as the joke teller, it's less appropriate for you to joke about it. So like, I do not need to be making jokes about the experiences of Black people in America. Mm-hmm. I have too much distance from that very real pain, and it is very painful for it to be funny.
And you saying this, and I'm trying to think of that kid that does that. He's a very famous stand-up comedian now. He's like a young guy that hits on everybody during his...
Matt Rife.
Yeah, and I can't stand that kid. I just can't, because when he says those jokes, and I'm not a Black person, mm-hmm. I feel a sense of inappropriateness that I don't... It doesn't resonate with it. I don't think that's funny.
Not in a way that's funny.
Yeah.
Now Kevin Hart making the same joke
100% is different. It's funny. Yeah.
I would argue that Kevin Hart's jokes are funnier, but it would be different because he's not punching down. It's a gimmick.
Correct.
Like,
Yes.
Matt Rife is a white man. So when he makes fun of a community that is stratified historically to be lower status than they're not
Yeah.
actually, due to systemic discrimination, it's a
Yeah.
punch down. While Kevin Hart, he's part of it. The pain is close to him. It's more his to make a joke about.
It's the whole thing, right? Like I can talk shit about my family, but nobody else can. Right? The whole like I can make fun of myself, but you cannot make fun of me, right? That kind of like I it's my territory to do it, not your territory,
Right.
right? When
Right.
you do
And
it is
it's not that I can't. It's not that I can't say anything taboo. If I want to make jokes about my own trauma or about white people in Florida, like I can say a lot of
right.
things, right?
Exactly.
While like Kevin Hart and Matt Rife both, even if it's about Black women, Kevin Hart is now a little bit more distant from it, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where Matt Rife lost a lot of his female audience was the jokes he made about women.
Yeah.
But here's the thing also. So the book does give the example of when they're talking about distance and pain, that there are studies that have been done on that people who respond to sexist jokes versus neutral jokes were also more likely to have a greater tolerance and less remorse after being asked if it was okay that they had personally harassed a woman. So they had they had a greater tolerance for harassment of women, and they had less remorse for saying I did harass a woman and I'm not
Yes.
sorry about it.
Yeah.
So there is that connection. And there is also that connection with racist jokes, that people who laugh at them have a higher tolerance for racism and show less remorse for it and admit that they've done it.
Yeah.
So I'm only going to give an example of the sexist joke because, again, pain and distance, right? I do not need to be online, somebody clipping it, showing me saying a racist joke, even if I'm using it as an example of what not to do. So, for example, the joke they did
We
in
have
this,
to put like a banner not to do it.
don't do this.
No.
So the example, and this, some people are going to see it and be like, oh, that's harmless. But this is what I'm getting at. The example of the sexist joke in this study was that a man and a woman are in the office. They get trapped in the elevator. There's no way they're coming out. And the woman looks at the man and says, make me feel like a woman. And he takes off his clothes and asks her to fold them.
Ask him to what? Oh, fold the clothes. Fold. I couldn't hear the fold.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
So let's talk about anatomy of the joke there. The misleading part is that you think it's going to be sexual.
Yes.
But then it's a housekeeping.
Yes.
So then what's the other part of the anatomy of a joke?
The
Truth.
Oh, the truth. Yeah. Sorry. I thought that's
right. Yeah. So that's where, and the book doesn't say this, but this is just like me thinking, I was thinking this is part of inappropriate versus appropriate is when if someone thinks that joke is genuinely funny, there's a part of them that thinks there's some truth in that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And and that's I can already hear the backlash on that. I just think it's funny. I just think it's funny. But like what we interpret as funny is when we see a kernel of truth.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think that that's funny?
Oh, as soon as I was listening to the audiobook of this book and I could just hear, you had just said in an episode we had about like, guys, don't say the joke at work. Yeah. And I could just hear you say that while I was listening to it. I was like, this is what it is, because the kernel of truth is, in this case of this joke, I see you as a sexual object who is to do my laundry.
Yep.
And there's too much systemic pain. There's too much going on in the world that's hard to break out of for that to be funny to a lot of, and there are women who will laugh at it. I mean, there are women who, like we talk about internalized sexism and all of that, but it's not your joke to make. Now, it'd be different if like, what's her name? Eliza Scherlinger. I'll never get her name right. Like, it'd be different if she made, but like Eliza would never make a joke.
And then she'll be like, I want to fold it. Like, I don't want to
come back all the way. It wouldn't be like, I'm not going to have sex with you. I'm going to fold your clothes.
Fold your clothes. Exactly. That's exactly what I thought. She'll be like,
Right. Oh, you thought, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it would be that's different because she's more, it's not as distant, it's closer.
I mean, these I am so amazed about how many things I find funny on, like the things that I find funny on social media, right? Are the things that women say, or people, I have ADHD, or people who have ADHD, right? Like say like, so how many spoons do you have laying around your house, for example, right? Like for ADHD. Or like if you're a woman, right? Like, oh, so I have you, like just stupid thing that you thought that you're only one that didn't, like,
Mhm.
I can't think of a single
Eliza
thing right now.
Sherlinger has one on Ugly Bra.
Yeah, like you know what I'm saying? Like,
You
and even
know,
like
man,
other things that I don't want to talk about here because it doesn't, but things that we all do, and you're like, oh my god, like, and it's funny because it's true, right? Like, is that
right?
whole the whole thing? This is funny because it's true. Because
And
if it
it's
wasn't true, you wouldn't be funny because you see something that you thought it was very unique to you, for example, or if something that you thought and now it's being broadcast and you're
mhm,
like, oh, that, yeah, I do
got
that,
me.
like, yep, yep, that's exactly what I, yep,
But
you
it's
got it.
also only funny if it's coming from someone who in real life that would not be a threat to you.
Yeah, so like if it
Coming
has to
from
be
a
a
man,
woman that looks like a day-to-day woman, if it's like
right?
an artist or like somebody like, in fancy clothes saying like, oh, we all have, like, our, like, what was her name? Gwyneth Paltrow, like saying like, oh yeah, I have like the same, like, no, you don't, bitch, you
No,
don't.
you don't. Well, that's why
Joe.
when COVID first started and there was all those celebrities who sang Imagine and it was like, oh, we're on this together. People were like, you're on a yacht
Mm,
right now. We are not in
yes.
this together.
Let's talk about that analogy that you had, that very beautiful picture that you have for your presentation that looks exactly like that, where the people are on
The
the balcony.
water.
They're like, I know.
But and that's not even the Imagine thing wasn't even, I'm so flattered you remembered my image.
Of course I do.
The Imagine thing wasn't even a joke, but like I think that is something to keep in mind of, and they recommend in the book, like taking the humor out of it, what is the message? And to me, I think if you take the humor out of it, like that's where Matt Rife really screwed up in his opening stand up. He made the joke about there was a woman with a black eye and like that somebody had hit her.
Mm,
And there was a critique of that, not just for domestic violence, though obviously that was why women were mad. It also like was not even a joke. Like it wasn't even, there was no
yeah.
ha
Punchline.
ha. Like it was like, so what's the punchline? The punchline was just
She got
somebody
punched.
hit a woman, ha ha. Right. And
Yeah.
that was like, that
Yeah.
wasn't even a joke, So um I think we have to think of, if you take the humor out of it, would it be appropriate for you to say? If the answer is no, then don't make a joke about it.
Yeah. Leave it to the stand-up comedians that are getting paid to do that, and don't mind the canceling part of it, right? Like, don't do that with your coworkers. Like, if you want to go watch, somebody said these jokes, go do that. But like, I can't. It's funny because there's a right before I joined this, showed up on my Instagram, like this Brazilian stand-up comedian who's actually doing a show in English here in Chicago. Um, and he was canceled in Brazil back like a few years ago because he made a very, very, very hard joke um, about a mother and their baby. Like, that was not even based on race or anything. It was just like really, really effed up. And he was like, he was part of a like TV show, and he was really big, and he just like collapsed after that. And then a few years back, he started like a podcast, and people start getting funny again. But then I was watching his, like, for example, he made a joke again. I don't think we're giving examples, okay, people. But he was saying how he took the whole thing about pronouns, but he made it funny because of the language barrier. Because he's like, it took me 50, like 30 years to learn he, she, they. And then you're like, nope, nope, none of them are true. So he wasn't making necessarily a
He wasn't
joke
making
about,
fun of non-binary people. He was making
correct. He was saying, like,
all
dude,
will struggle. Yeah.
exactly. So I was like, see, now that is a type. If it was somebody else that I knew for a fact, right? Like if somebody that you know it had a different outcome. If it was an American saying that, like in the same language, you're like, but that why is this
It's
like?
not
Oh,
funny.
it took you
The funny
just
part is that he's bilingual.
correct, and he took forever to learn that.
I take adult Spanish classes, and it's a common joke of like, oh, I'm trying to remember when it's like when you're an English speaker learning Spanish and you're trying to remember what gender a washing machine is.
Oh yeah,
And it's like if I was making fun of Spanish speakers, not okay. But then I'm making fun of
of it.
myself, not able
Yep.
to remember, like that's different.
Now imagine for me that so Portuguese and Spanish things also have different things. So for example, computer in Portuguese it's a masculine, and
But
in Spanish it's female. So
yeah.
I get very confused because I don't know.
And
So
German has a lot of different, like, what do they call them? Definitive articles, I think. Like a
yeah,
bunch of different ways you can say the, and they're all gendered too. Like, that's weird.
yeah, no, it does. Like one of my favorite like people that I watch like on social media are actually foreign people that live in Brazil, but they live in Brazil. They're not just traveling. They didn't just go there for a day and like, oh, this is hilarious. No, these are people that live there, right? And they're like, this is what I think about. This is what I think it's funny. Like things I find it weird in Brazil. And he's like, they shower twice a day. And you're like, because the guy's from like France, right? He's like, we barely shower. Like, so
Right.
so, and that is why it's funny. But like the other day, one of them made a joke about because there's this popular misconception about Brazilian women, and I'm not talking about the over sexualization of them, but now there is a different one, which is Brazilian women. We like they are very over loving and they're always touching, and I'm not that, right? Like I'm not that kind of, and I know a lot of people they're not, but that's a very but a lot of them are right. And some of them it's like you haven't really truly been loved if you have never been loved by a Brazilian before, like they say these things. But then he did a skit where like the woman was too much to the point that he was starting to get angry, and I'm like, that's where you lost the joke, when you made that a problem and not funny.
When you're not part of that community.
Yeah, and like and not even and even if I don't know if it was a Brazilian man I would have feel just as about it. But I think it's because they turned that into an issue instead of like, oh, this is
There wasn't
funny.
a punchline. That was the only.
Yeah, it was just like, wow, this is just annoying. This is not cute and funny. This is just annoying. And you're like, but so why the heck are you dating Brazilian women then? And just go get the fuck out of there. Go.
Here's the thing that I think a lot of people mess up with humor is they see, and this is part of like passive aggressive, corporate, indirect, usually white culture of the I'm being indirect with you, so I'm saying it as a joke, but there's no
Mm,
real joke. You're just venting, and you know you'll be held accountable for if it's a problem. So it's just a joke.
yeah.
And that's it. That's not a joke. Like, and that was what people complained about so much with the Matt Rife special was even this wasn't even like against a protected group. He just went off about airlines for a while in that special. Like,
Yeah.
I,
He's just, ugh.
it was just like it was like where's the joke? Like there are tons of airplane jokes. Like airplanes
Yeah.
are so comfortable, it's rife with humor material. But like there just wasn't a punchline. And so I think that is part of that. It's very easy to fall into with corporate indirect, with people are afraid to give you direct, respectful, appropriate feedback, that it can be the oh well, they're just da 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 da. And what? It was just a joke. And like nobody's fallen for that.
Yeah. But again, right? Like you bring that up to whoever, and they're like, well, that's just how they are. Fuck.
If they're
My
high
favorite
status
thing.
or protected group, yeah. Because if
Yeah.
they're a favorite, yeah.
Because they're just, oh, that's how they grew up. Well, but that's not where they're living. Like we're not living back in the 40s. Like jokes that were appropriate, never appropriate, but jokes that were tolerated back then, they're no longer tolerated nowadays. Things that people thought, I remember horrible jokes I used to tell as a child.
No, I mean, even in my
I mean, things that I am very ashamed to say that I even said that, but I was like 7 years old. I was just reading. I didn't even understand them.
I'm millennial. I'm of the age where when I was like middle school age, everybody said, "Oh, that's gay," as if it's a bad thing. And like now,
Yeah.
that's like, why would you say that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we learn more with time. And it's like, I think it's Maya Rudolph who said, "When you know better, you do better,"
Yeah, of course.
right? And that's the issue I have. That's where I'm like, we don't need to cancel completely. Like, we need to see genuine remorse and reform.
Yeah,
But when you know better, you do better.
absolutely.
So I'll just close out on my end, at least. Things you can do to incorporate humor into a workplace. Learn to make fun of yourself if you're a very high leader. And if you're not, think about never punching down. Always you can punch up. Don't recommend doing that at work because you want the leaders to be happy with you. But think of distance and pain. And think if you remove the humor, is it still okay for you to say? And the point of humor at work is to build a culture of levity, to build trust. It's not about getting laughs. If you get laughs along the way, congrats. If you are in a position of power and you're like, I'm just not ready for this, or it's not going to go over well, or whatever, find somebody who is funny and make them your humor ambassador and see what kind of thing is there a skit you can do with them before the all hands. Can they make fun of you? That's something a lot of CEOs of big companies do, is like they have somebody who is like allowed to make fun of them in that setting, and it helps lighten the mood.
Like a roast.
Yeah, a roast, essentially. Yeah, I mean, within parameters, obviously,
Yeah.
but that's something that is a tactic
We
that exists.
love a good roast of powerful people, man. We do. Like, let's just be
Yeah,
on.
and it makes them more relatable. And if you truly have power, it's not going to
Yeah.
take anything away from you. If
Yeah.
anything, build, because remember, people find it more respectful and competent building. And I knew you'd like this. The CEO of Bare Minerals said, "People want authenticity. If you're not a joke teller, don't practice joke telling. Practice being yourself." So, humor comes in many forms. I know I'm more of a storyteller. That is like where I get the most laughs, even if I mean to or not. And I sometimes I don't even realize. Sometimes I'm like, I wasn't even joking. That was like, we really do eat squirrel where I'm from. That was not a joke. Um, but like you'll find your rhythm, and just because you're not, again, Kevin Hart or Ali Wong, doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. But you can take, like, a lot of leaders take an improv class or a stand-up comedy class, or
Mhm.
actually shared a study yesterday on my TikTok on how they use stand-up comedy class training for leaders in the military, and it reduced their depression and stress and helped them build camaraderie.
Yeah.
And finally, take ownership if the joke doesn't work. The tendency we have to, when a joke doesn't land, to say, "Oh, that person doesn't have a sense of humor." That's
Oh,
our ego protecting ourselves. Okay. Humor is subjective. It was funny to you, it wasn't funny to them. Make it right. Recognize it happened, diagnose what went wrong, and make it right. And that is going to help you. That also requires vulnerability. That is still an opportunity to make a connection and build some trust. If you ignore it, you lose those points.
yeah.
So that's all I have.
Those are good points. No, I think this is a good conversation. And I think it's something that we don't really think about it, right? Like, it's not, um, like, I don't think I've ever been called, oh, you're funny. I think a couple of times, but like mainly like that I'm not necessarily funny, but I'm fun, right? Like, so at work, uh, the more, and I think it's interesting that the younger the team is, the more comfortable I feel with making jokes with them, because I think the gap is so different. Like, most of the time, like, I think a couple of jobs ago, we were, I don't know, 10, at least a decade. I was older than them, than the majority of them. And I could joke. I kind of joked that they were like, you guys won't get this. Like 90% of the jokes I would make, they wouldn't get it. And I had to explain to them. But it was it was interesting because they my humor in the beginning, which I had to learn that. Um, I joke that if I'm making fun of you, or if I'm saying it's because I like you, because otherwise I wouldn't feel the need to do that, right? Because
My brothers and I are.
right, like it's being funny and making a joke and like being like, what are you doing? Like kind of being like you putting in an effort that you don't have to, right? If somebody asks you a question, I really can't think of an example now, but like I'm just gonna make one up. I don't know if it's gonna work, but we'll go from there. So like somebody walks back there, like, how do I do this? Like, oh my God, I already told you like 15 times how to do this, right? But if I say that and they know that I'm joking, right? They know that like she never told me this before or something like that. It kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't know. I feel like that they can understand that, and then I appreciate them
That's a
because
level of trust. I mean, that's
yeah, and
something.
it's like if not, I would have just told you the answer. Like if I didn't care about you, like if I
There's
didn't like you.
the difference between doing that day one and doing that day 100. You know.
Oh yeah. Which that was my mistake because I am that person that I always give everybody a hard time. Everybody, right? Like I am from off the bat, I give people a hard time. People that I like, people that I think, oh, this is gonna go great. Like we're gonna work together. This is gonna be great. And I like to give people a hard time from day one. GM, whoever they are, right? Like I don't care, what status they have. But I learned that, a lot of people that are reporting to me, they don't feel as comfortable because I feel very comfortable with them right away.
Mhm.
But they don't because I forget that not everybody is as comfortable with, levels of whatever of leadership as I've always been. I've
Perceived
always
as
been.
you down.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, it's just because I really do like you and I feel comfortable with you because otherwise I wouldn't, right? I wouldn't joke with you. So I think that that's what
But you're probably the leader who would love it if they punched at you.
oh my God. I always like, please do. Like,
Yeah.
um, because that's the thing. Like, I think, it's, it goes back to like, I do, man, like the moment, I think the moment I lost passion for hospitality was when it became too serious. Was
Mm.
it was before the pandemic even, where I used to have a great time at work. Even like, and even if I start as an agent now, I would not be able to, like a front desk agent, I would not be able to have as much fun as I did back in the day because the world wasn't this serious. I
Mm.
think that nowadays, like, and I'm not talking about being canceled. I'm not talking about these topics. I'm just talking in general.
No, well, first thing when you said, I thought post pandemic. That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
I was gonna say even like, and I was just gonna say that now too. Like, see, we're in the same. That after the pandemic, it became very everybody is just so guarded, right? Like everything is so um and I am going to go into a different segment just really quick, but like, it's like we all close our hearts, right, to everything, to loving people, to trusting people, to laughing with people, to just enjoying anything, right? Life became very, very serious. And this is funny because this has actually been a topic that I've been watching a lot for the past week of like, it's like if you believe in chakras and stuff like that, like, or this energy center or whatever it is, spirituality or whatever you believe in. But it feels like we all, as a society, we all close this part of us. We don't want to feel too much because we suffer too much.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that in my personal life that once, and I talked about a few bad experiences I had. And what happened is they started building on top of each other. And then got to a point that I was so serious that I was like, what the heck is this person? You know what I'm saying? Because I used to be so like, people used to call me free spitter all the time. I probably wouldn't be called that now. And it's not the age that did that to me. It's not the responsibilities that did that to me. It was the pain and the suffering and all the problems that again, because, and I grew up, my dad is very much like this, and I've told him many times, like, Dad, just because you love and you care doesn't mean that you have to worry about it and take it so seriously. You can love somebody, and your love can be expressed towards people with levity, right? With being comfortable, with not so much worry, so much stress. And I've always understood that from a young age, that there is this correlation between, and we talked, the very first thing that we said, it was that being serious equals that you care, and it doesn't mean that, right? Like, I mean, the that video that was, it went viral, of the bride that grab her vowels, and she blows like as if it was like dust out of the vowels. Have you seen that?
Uh-uh.
So they're getting married, right? And he says his vowels, and so she comes in to say her. So she, grabs a paper, and she opens the paper, like as if it was dust, and he's like, "What the heck?" Like, she's like, kind
I
of
don't
even,
remember those. Yep.
because like it took him forever. So like in the moment that is supposed to be their most serious moment, she was being herself, and she made a joke about him, right?
Right.
About the relationship, and that, like, just that, right? And he thought it was funny. Everybody thought it was funny. In a moment that is usually so serious, because like the person is there, and you say your vowels, and you're like, oh, because we're gonna spend eternity together. It's like, no, this MF made me wait. I don't know how fucking long. So he's
But
gonna.
it's funny because the kernel of truth, if they had only been together a couple years, and then it wouldn't make sense to be like, what
Oh
she
my
has,
god! If it was like, can you
like, the
imagine if they were for
truth is
years?
that she wants to be with him for a long time.
Yeah.
You know.
So I think that is the bringing uh joy and levity to everything, right? Like, nothing needs to be. Why is it that in hospitals, especially children's hospital, they bring the clowns, they bring people that make you laugh, right? Like, why do they tell you when you're like, one of the things about when people go to the hospitals is that they want to laugh, they want to forget about all of that pressure, because I honestly don't believe that humans, we are made for to deal with all this pressure all the time and this seriousness all the time. So it's the whole, like, get your mind out of things, so I will say, I will finalize my mind, and with, I love the lessons I've learned. I think that it reminded me to take things with humor, to I just making fun of yourself on a day to day, but like, oh gosh, I can't believe I did this again. Like you said, like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this again. I was like, yep, I did. I
That was
definitely,
me. Oops, I did it again. Culprit.
yep, I did lock myself out, and it's like, I don't have my phone with me kind of deal. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, so I think it was a good reminder, and I learned some good lessons. So appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you enjoyed them, and I totally recommend the book to anybody who listens to it. So
All right. Well, we'll see you all next week, same time, same place.
sounds good.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody, thank you for thank you, thank you, everybody who listened. Sorry.